Hello and welcome to the 2021 Toronto International Film Festival. My name is Ravi Srinivasan and I'm a programmer here at Tiff. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this special virtual Q&A for the world premiere screenings of Scarborough. Today we are joined by the screenwriter and author Catherine Hernandez, as well as co-directors Shasha Nakhai and Rich Williamson. Welcome everyone.
Hi. So wonderful to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us, the three of you. I wanted to start first by asking Shasha and Rich. This film was adapted from the critically acclaimed 2017 novel written by Catherine. And I wanted to find out first about your first encounter with the book and why you wanted to make this into a feature film.
Yeah, I've known Catherine for a long time, just from the Toronto Filipino community. And Catherine was actually in my very first documentary I made in school. Fun fact. And we had worked together on a dance film about 6 years ago now, Rich, Catherine, and I. And when her book came out, she emailed us and said, "Hey, I'd like to send you a copy of this book." And it all kind of started from there.
I mean, it's quite a unique collaboration process because it's not often that you have the author of the source material also write the screenplay. So I'm wondering if you can talk about, that collaboration process. Obviously, a lot of trust coming in from Catherine to, let her take her work and, have you folks both, create a feature film out of it. I wonder if you can talk about how that process worked out between the three of you. Catherine, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. I had approached Shasha and Rich because I had been contacted by a few filmmakers who were interested in optioning the book into a film. And as much as their reels were fantastic, I just was a bit worried because they were very polished pieces, and I didn't think that was the right fit for my neighborhood. I wanted to really respect my area and its people by not having very large film units. And I knew with documentary filmmaking that it would be much less invasive to the community. And so I reached out to Shasha and Rich saying, would you like to somehow make it shoot it as you would a documentary, but then I would write the screenplay because I come from theater. And so writing a script wasn't too much of a stretch. But in order to make the script, because I didn't know how to format a screenplay, I used Google Images and Word to make my first screenplay because I didn't know how to do it. Of course, I've come a long way from since then. But thankfully, with Rich and Shasha's guidance, I was able to create the script in about 2 weeks. And but then really, because in theater, you just sort of hand over your script and you feel confident in the directors and the production team. That's exactly how I felt with them, is that they're brilliant people. I've seen their work before. I completely trusted them. And I knew that they were going to be able to bring this project to the finish line.
Yeah, when we first we talked for a while with Catherine, and I remember in our early conversations, we were like, "Oh no, this isn't for us. Just so you know, we can't access that $10 million tier of telefilm, but we do have this one shot, and it was through Real Asian's first feature lab, and we were basically like, oh, this is the only thing we have access to. Let's try it, and if it doesn't work, we'll go from there, and we'll see what else can be done." Thankfully, that one avenue we had ended up working out.
Catherine, you mentioned the representation of Scarborough and your community. For those, I mean, obviously they would have just seen the film, but from those who aren't from Toronto or the Greater Toronto area, and don't really have a sense of what Scarborough is and what it's about, I'm wondering if you can maybe talk about the perception of Scarborough within this area, and some of the good or negative stereotypes that are found when people think about Scarborough and talk about Scarborough, and sort of what maybe you were trying to achieve with your novel.
Well, there are Scarboroughs all over the world. Every city has a few pockets, where people are just forgotten, that they're an afterthought for the government in power. And usually it's because of race and class that happens. That's definitely the case with Scarborough, is that it is the eastern part of Toronto. Sadly, Toronto has many pockets that are like Scarborough, where again, because of race and class, people have had to make very difficult decisions about where they live, how they make money, how they survive. And because of that, it developed a particular rep with regards to how safe it is here. But again, it's a lot of that, in my opinion, is because of race and class. And if you think about it, we're really close to the Pickering power plant, so we're very close to the nuclear power plant. And so for many years, this place was seen as sort of like the dive. It was considered like the butt of Toronto, and recently, sadly, over the last 10 years, it's now become gentrified because we're only half an hour GO train ride into the downtown core. So you'll just see, like, around here is that it was it's definitely changed in the last 5 to 10 years, but mostly racialized people, a lot of lower income folks, people who rely on transit more than their car. But then the transit doesn't work very well. So you can just see we don't have access to a lot of things out here in the East. And so writing the novel, I really wanted to show what it means to be an ally to our community, how there are decisions that are made in offices far away from where we are that affect the front line, and what it means to build bridges, sincere bridges with its people. And so that's what we were hoping to capture with the film, is like a sense of community. And I'm hoping that that's how people feel when they watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. Rich, Shasha, I want to ask you, one of the fantastic aspects of this film is the amount of representation and equal parts given to these three different stories, and particularly the different nuances, cultural nuances, that I think folks are going to find quite poignant and authentic. What were the challenges of trying to balance all of these stories and sort of articulate and represent some of the different cultural nuances that are seen here?
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge, and it was a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility, but I always went back to what brought me to the project, and that was the Filipino representation. I had been working in film for 10 years at the time, and I had never seen anything like this in Canadian film. And the specificity in the smallest little details that Catherine would write, this small ways that Bing's mom kisses him on the forehead, just the little things like that. I think that's kind of what anchored me to move through the process, and just kind of humble myself to know okay, this is resonating with me, but just to humble myself to know that I'm not able to be the one to be the measure of authenticity for how a child with ASD might behave. We have over 60 speaking roles in this film, from a wide range of different backgrounds. And so at times it would be a little bit overwhelming to know oh my God, we have to get this right. But I think what grounded me through the process was just knowing why did I come to the project, and how can we create an environment in which everybody is collaborating and feels free to bring their lived experiences to the table as well. So yeah, do you want to add anything?
And Catherine was so open and collaborative the whole time that it just sort of steered all of our decisions. It created an openness while we were shooting it, where there was no bad idea, right? The first thing we said as soon as we started, when we were having our kind of opening speeches and just talking about why we got involved, it's there's no bad ideas. So like if anybody has an experience that they want to bring to the table, or like if there's something that seems kind of off, like please tell us, because ultimately we want to try. Like there are so many different aspects to this film, and certainly to the book as well, that like it would be impossible for us, just the two of us, to bring our lived experience, and that would be it. You know, like it had to be a collaborative, community-based film.
Catherine mentioned, you know, her desire to sort of have more of a documentary sort of look and feel to this story, and I think it's quite evident that it does. And given that, you know, your sort of rich background in documentary film, you've made several shorts. Shasha, your feature Take Light was at Hot Docs and other festivals in 2018. What was sort of, you know, what was it like for you both to be transitioning into, you know, the fiction world, even though it still has this documentary look and feel? You know, what kind of influences did you draw from in terms of style and storytelling to make this transition?
Yeah, well, it was a totally different experience. I mean, from the start, I didn't know that we had all the tools to do it. I mean, we had never worked with actors before, really. I mean, like I've shot a few things with actors in it, and I've sort of witnessed the process, but it was always sort of like this, like, it almost felt like, oh, I'll never, like, I don't think I'm capable of doing that. It just seems so, like, just such a mystical process. So I didn't, like, yeah, it was just sort of jumping into something totally different. And every day was something totally different. And
I mean, with documentary, your job is to bring someone's essence like to the forefront, and so we just kind of leaned into that a bit. At the beginning, we actually tried a little bit too much to make it too fictiony, if you know what I mean. We tried to control things too much. We tried to control the children too much and be like, okay, there's a shot of you opening a door, and then there's a wide shot of you walking out the door. Like you can't do that with children, like, especially ones that have never acted before. So sometimes there's a lot of things in this film where there was only one take, and you had to get all your coverage in that one take because you might not ever get it again. And so that was kind of like the only way we were able to do this film. Because we're used to, as documentarians, something only happens once, and you have to get to cover it in a way that you don't have to do it 20 times. Although we did do 20 takes. In some instances, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's one of the most impressive aspects of this film are the quality of the performances that you received from your young actors, Liam Diaz, Essence Fox, and Anne Beatel. Can you talk to us about the casting process? How did you find, you know, these three remarkable actors, particularly the notion of, you know, they're dealing with such heavy content for actors of that age, but, you know, they really pulled it off. And I think it's kudos to, you know, the three of you and the process that you had with them to get those kind of performances.
Well, we first sat down with Catherine. That was like the first step. We talked about every single character in the story and the intention behind that character and the background of that character. And so that's where we started. I don't know if you have anything to add about that process, Catherine.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that every time that someone reads a book, they've got already in their head, they're already drawing these characters. Like, you know, if you've written a good book, people are already drawing in their heads like what they look like. And I think that what's weird about that is that everyone collectively, all of the, you know, the hundreds, thousands of people that read the book actually come up with something very similar in their mind if you've done a good job. And thankfully, we all sort of had an image in our mind as to what these people look like. Very little difference between us as to what we imagined. And it's obvious because of how these wonderful people have cast it, because the hard work that they put into it, trying to find this exact match of what we had in our minds and to have them like stand before us. And it looked like, you know, like all of them, they would stand in front of me and it would just be really hard to not like burst out into tears because I'm like, wait a minute, I just wrote you. Of course, they're not the character, but it's just bizarre that this child is standing in front of you, and this is a person that you imagined way back in like 2015, writing this person down, and they're manifested in front of you. Very strange experience. But yeah, and then I'll let you guys get into like what exactly was the process with finding these folks. But
Yeah, we looked everywhere. It took, I would
How
say,
wide? When you say everywhere, like how wide did
we
you
did it all ourselves, and it took like 6 months. We would like hang out at Jollibee in Scarborough. Like, this is not. We looked everywhere, like theater schools, comedians, YouTube series.
Yep.
And with the kids, it was really casting their parents as well. And yeah, like what happened to the casting process?
Yeah.
It was a tough mix, actually, because they all were like a lot of them were first-time actors. They had to be willing to work for not a lot of money because we were a micro budget. They also had to be willing to give up their evenings and weekends for almost a year, because we didn't have the ability to film during the week because the children had school. And they also had to be excellent actors. So people had to be this magic mix of all of them. And sometimes people wouldn't be what we imagined they might look like, but they were that magic mix of those three elements. Yeah.
And that's difficult too, because I know that like we both wanted to find people that would fit exactly what Catherine was thinking. And it's like, how do you do that? That's a really kind of difficult thing to do, to find that exact person. And I think at some point we just embraced, especially since we're working with non-actors, like, and especially with the children, like their energy, and like try to find a way to like have aspects of that character, but also don't try to change who they are, because that's a huge part of it. And because we're working in documentary, we want to be very loose, and I didn't want to kind of create a rigid situation where they had to hit the lines exactly and they had to be exactly like that person.
Right.
Yeah, that's a lot to ask a non-actor. Like, stand on this tape and then not be self-conscious of 20 people around you, and then remember this exact line. So just creating an environment in which people felt comfortable to explore was really important.
And being flexible, because everybody works differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we have a comedian and we have someone who's in theater, someone who's a non-actor, they all work differently. And so we would split the whole production into blocks, and like we'd do 4 days here, and then you knew that like 4 days later it'd be a completely different thing. And so just being open to changing with different working styles, you know? Yeah.
Okay, we're going to get you out of here on this last question. After seeing the film, how do you hope people will think of Scarborough, think of the community in Scarborough, and think of the different communities that are represented here on screen? What's your hope for that?
I hope that people understand that what makes a community are its people. It's not the buildings, it's not the monuments, the events. It's about the people. And when you have a city that is going through some really terrifying changes, in which so many of us do not have access to resources, I think we have to ask ourselves some really, really big questions around how can we continue to support each other sincerely and sustainably. So that's what I'm hoping for, because it's this, this film isn't just about Scarborough, it's about community. Yeah.
Shasha, Rich?
What Catherine said, one of the things that excites me is like for little beings out there in the world to watch this film and, have the affirmation of having someone look and have a life like theirs reflected on the big screen. But yeah, like I'm excited for those kinds of experiences. But also, I want people to take away the importance of community and to come away with a sense of the ways in which we are all linked together. And
Well, speaking as a former Bing raised by his Filipino mother, I thank you for this film, this novel, and I'm sure others who are watching are going to be thankful to see themselves on screen maybe for the first time. On behalf of Tiff and Toronto, Catherine, Shasha, and Rich, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And, we hope we'll see some of you in person as well.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.